I don't want to watch your stupid video. Just tell me, what are the best tier 4 upgrades for the Marauders? Okay. Number 1, Mr. Sinister ult. Number 2, Mr. Sinister passive. Number 3, Mr. Sinister special. Number 4, Mystique special. Number 5, Mystique basic. Number 6, Sabretooth passive. And number 7, Mystique passive. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Orange Essentials. Today we are talking about the Marauders. So I was a little bit hesitant to make this video for a couple reasons. One, when we got the new Marauder characters, we were explicitly told that it's currently an incomplete team, which means two things. One, I'm pretty much going to have to remake this video in the future. And two, we don't quite know exactly how the full team is going to function, so it's a little bit tough to judge what abilities are really essential. For example, if we didn't know that Mr. Sinister was going to take the buffs that Mystique had and spread them, then it would be hard to judge how important it is for Mystique to copy a bunch of buffs in the first place. It would seem like that would be less important. So instances like that. That said, we do have a pretty good idea of what we would like to see the 5th Marauder character do, which is why I've included 2 substitutes here on this graphic. Now, obviously, for example, a character like Magneto is incredible on the Marauders. Ultron's great on the Marauders. I could go on, but a lot of these characters have other places that they should be. So the 2 substitutes I listed here are characters that most people tend not to have hard committed to another team. In particular, the reason why both of those substitutes are very good on this team is, for one, the team actually has a really good sustain thanks to Mr. Sinister constantly giving away his health. So giving out defense ups makes the team very, very durable. KINGPIN's going to give him 2 turns of defense up right away, and then he's also going to waste some enemy turns with summons that taunt. RIOT is going to give them defense up every other turn, and he's going to share some of the taunting responsibility. So it really keeps the team on the field and keeps them pretty durable while Sinister is healing everyone. In addition, non-damaging abilities really help to take advantage of the assist passives on both Mystique and Sabretooth. So KINGPIN, again, his first 2 turns are going to be non-damaging. RIOT, every other turn is going to be a non-damaging ability, so you actually end up getting really good damage value for those abilities because the Mystique and Sabretooth passives. And then, ultimately, the only thing STRYFE is really lacking as a tank is defense up. Once he has defense up, he's a really effective, really durable tank, and both KINGPIN and RIOT are pretty good about getting defense ups onto STRYFE. So that's why I have those 2 on the graphic. As for where the Marauders are currently best used, you can use them for Alliance War offense or defense. They definitely get defense perks, and with defense, it's a little bit of RNG. It depends on who Sinister wants to clone, which you have no control over. I'm hopeful that the 5th Marauder will in some way direct who Mr. Sinister clones, but maybe he won't, we'll see. But yeah, the Marauders are a bit of an interesting team, but what I really like about them is their sustain, and as soon as you put someone that's sharing some of the protection responsibility and giving out defense ups, combining that with Mr. Sinister's heal, I found that the team sustains really well and are very effective on Alliance War defense, which they're supposed to be. But if you don't want to gamble on that at all, you can use them very effectively on offense as well. But that's just a little bit about where the Marauders are at right now. Otherwise, let's jump into their T4s. Alright, first we'll take a look at STRYFE. So taking a look at STRYFE's basic, when you put tier 4s in this ability, it's going to add 50% damage to the primary target, and it's going to go from transferring 4 positive effects to Mr. Sinister to transferring all positive effects to Mr. Sinister. So this is just a slightly above average ability. It's not that common that you'll be hitting into someone with more than 4 positive effects, but when you are hitting a character like Colossus or Juggernaut or Ultron, something like that, giving all those buffs to Sinister can be an absolute game changer, especially when he's going to then use his special and give it to the entire team. And again, 50% damage is, these days it's towards the higher end of a pretty average basic upgrade, but STRYFE's damage is certainly decent for a tank. So for me, this squeaks by as a 3-star. Alright, taking a look at STRYFE's special. When you put tier 4s in STRYFE's special, instead of gaining 10% barrier, he's going to gain 15% barrier. So an extra 5% barrier. It's just not that much. He's not an extraordinarily high health tank to begin with. He has other ways to gain barrier, like whenever Mr. Sinister goes below 50% health, which happens surprisingly often because Mr. Sinister likes to give away his health. So yeah, it's just not particularly impactful. So for me, this is a 1-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at STRYFE's ultimate. So when you put tier 4s in his ultimate, it's going to do an extra 60% damage to all the splash targets and the primary target. I mean, what is there to say? That is an exactly standard ultimate upgrade. As far as a splash attack, 60% is pretty much the default, so I mean, that's a 2-star. Alright, finally we'll take a look at STRYFE's passive. So when you put tier 4s in STRYFE's passive, he's going to, on war defense, give mutants an extra 10% resistance, and villains an extra 10% focus. And I mean, it's alright. In my experience, this team doesn't really rely too heavily on their focus and resistance for that many things. I mean, they certainly do apply some debuffs, and resistance is always helpful, but at the end of the day, you're usually going to lose a resistance roll anyway, and 10% is probably not going to be a huge difference there. And as for the focus, again, they tend to do pretty well, and while they do a fair amount of debuffs, they don't really have any critical debuffs that have to land. It's not like you have to score a disrupt to beat certain enemy teams or anything like that, so for me, this is just a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at SABRETOOTH. So when you put tier 4s in SABRETOOTH's basic, it improves the damage to the primary target by 40%. Now, it is true that because his passive specifies that he's doing an assist on non-damaging attacks, this will also improve the damage of his assist, but it's not by much, it's by even less than 40%, so it's just a very, very subpar amount of damage, and it's very standard, so for me, this is a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at SABRETOOTH's special. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, it's going to improve the damage to the primary target by 70%, and then it's going to do another 40% damage to all the adjacent targets. So this is just a little bit higher than average, and when you combine the fact that not only is this a slightly above average damage upgrade, but also SABRETOOTH is one of the heavy damage dealers on this team, and it gains extra damage per Marauder ally. For this reason, because it's a little bit above average, I gotta give it a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at SABRETOOTH's ultimate. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, it upgrades quite a few things. He's going to do an extra 50% damage to the primary target. He's going to, instead of chaining from 3 to 5 targets, chain to 4 to 5 targets, so you're guaranteed hitting an additional chain target as long as they're on the field and nothing's going to intercept it. It raises the damage slightly that he does to the chain targets, but most importantly, it improves the damage that the bleeds are going to do, and this should put 2 turns of 2 bleeds on every one that he hits. So because you're getting a good amount of extra burst up front and all the extra bleed damage, this is actually a pretty sizable damage upgrade for him, so for me this is a strong 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at SABRETOOTH's passive. So putting tier 4s in this ability is going to improve several things. First, on turn, instead of healing for 10% health, he's going to heal for 15% health, which is certainly nice, but more importantly, he's going to go from, on a full Marauder team, at least a current full Marauder team, he's going to go from a 60% chance to assist on non-damaging abilities to a 100% chance to assist on non-damaging abilities. And this is a big part of why this team works, so it's very, very essential. Getting all those assists is a tremendous amount of extra damage, so for me, this is an easy 4-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Mystique. So taking a look at Mystique's basic, when you put tier 4s in this ability, it improves quite a bit. So first it's going to do an extra 40% damage to the primary target, but then also an extra 40% damage on both the first and second bonus attack. And since you're guaranteed at least one bonus attack, for sure this is going to do an extra 80% damage, and if you get the second bonus attack, it's going to do an extra 120% damage. So that alone makes this tremendous as far as a basic upgrade. Then, in addition, she would normally copy only 1 positive effect, and with the T4s, she's now going to copy 2 positive effects. And again, this is really, really useful because of the way this team functions. Mr. Sinister will take whatever buffs she has and distribute them to the entire team, so the more she can collect, the better. So in addition to a tremendous amount of extra damage, you're getting more buffs that are eventually going to go to the entire team. It's really, really huge. This is an easy, easy 4-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Mystique's special. So putting tier 4s in this ability improves several things. Firstly, it improves the damage to the primary target by 30%. Instead of attacking 2 targets that don't have stealth, she's going to attack 3 targets that don't have stealth. She's going to do an extra 30% damage to those targets, and obviously the full amount of extra damage to the target that she otherwise wouldn't have hit. And all of that is pretty nice, but the really, really big thing here is if Mr. Sinister is an ally, which we're going to go ahead and assume, then instead of flipping 1 positive effect to negative, she's going to flip 2 positive effects to negative effects. And this is really, really big. I cannot understate. I think a buff flip is arguably the most powerful effect in the game. And the reason I say that is the difference between someone having offense up when they attack you or having offense down when they attack you is tremendous. It is a huge swing in terms of the effectiveness of what's about to happen. The same is true of whether the person you're attacking has defense up or instead defense down, if they have speed up or instead slow. There's just so many instances where a buff flip is absolutely huge. And so flipping an extra buff on everyone that she's hitting with this ability, which is usually at least like 5 characters, very, very effective. So for me, again, this is an easy, easy 4-star. All right, so now we'll take a look at Mystique's ultimate. So when you put tier 4s in Mystique's ultimate, it's gonna make her attack on the primary target do 20% more damage, and then the mind-controlled enemy is gonna do an extra 20% damage as well. Well, okay, that's not quite saying it correctly. They're gonna gain an extra 20% base damage, and then they're gonna use that when they do their attack. So it actually is a sizable damage improvement. However, she pretty much always does this on turn 1, which is when people are most likely to have some sort of defense up or deflect or something like that, especially in Alliance War. And then even factoring that in, it's really not a tremendous amount of improved damage. So for that reason, for me, this is a 2-star. All right, now we'll take a look at Mystique's passive. So when you put tier 4s in Mystique's passive, it's gonna do a couple things. Firstly, instead of a 50% chance to gain evade on spawn, she's always gonna have that evade on spawn, which again, half the time that won't matter, but half the time it certainly can be impactful. But that alone is not why I like this ability. Much more importantly, on war defense, when paired with Sinister, instead of a 50% chance to assist on non-damaging abilities, she's gonna have a 100% chance to assist on non-damaging abilities. And that is huge. Taking advantage of all the non-damaging abilities by having both Mystique and Sabertooth assist on those abilities, suddenly you're getting more damage than you normally would have if you had just used that turn to attack with the character. So you end up literally getting a higher damage output than using a damaging ability by using a utility ability. So the fact that you can literally compound all those benefits is really, really big. So for that reason, again, for me, this is an easy, easy 4-star. All right, now we're gonna take a look at Mr. Sinister. So first we'll take a look at his basic. When you put tier 4s in Mr. Sinister's basic, it's going to improve the base damage on the ability to the primary target by 50%, and then instead of a 70% chance to get an assist from a random Marauder, he's going to guaranteed get that assist from a random Marauder. So all in all, it's certainly not an essential upgrade. The 50% damage isn't that crazy. However, the 30% of times that you don't get that assist from another Marauder, you're missing out on anywhere from like 10 to 25,000 damage. So that's really, really important, and you do want that. So while I don't think this is essential, and Mr. Sinister is not basic attacking that much, especially on war defense where there are opportunities to get ability energy, it's still definitely an above average upgrade. So for me, this is a 3-star. Now we'll take a look at Mr. Sinister's special. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, it does a few things. It's going to improve the base healing on the ability barely. It is going to improve the percentage healing based on his max health, an extra 5%, both to allies and to clones. And that's a moderate heal. He does have a decent sized health pool, but this ability is not particularly strong for the extra healing. It's particularly strong because he's going to take all the positive effects from an ally Mystique, and instead of spreading them to 3 random mutant or clone allies, he's now going to spread to all mutant and clone allies. And this is absolutely huge. Mystique is really, really good at acquiring a bunch of positive effects as part of her kit, and so only spreading this to 3 characters, you end up with at least 2 characters getting shafted and missing out on, again, very often like 6 or 7 positive effects. And you don't need me to tell you that if you could just give a character an extra 6 or 7 positive effects, could be death proof, could be a bunch of regens, could be offense up right before a big damaging ability, could be an immunity. I mean, there's just so many really, really strong things that you definitely want going to everyone. So for me, this is an easy, easy 4-star. All right, now we're gonna take a look at Mr. Sinister's ult. So before we get into this, Mr. Sinister's ult and his passive, which we'll talk about after, have a lot to do with how strong the clone character is. But rather than recap all the information and all the math that goes into where the clone stats and abilities and everything come from, I have a video which is titled the top 10 best Mr. Sinister clones. I highly recommend you go watch it because in that video I break down exactly where all of the stats and everything for the Mr. Sinister clone comes from. So I'm going to just very briefly talk about that here, but again, if you want to do the deep dive on it, top 10 best Mr. Sinister clones video on my channel will give you all the information you need on that. Having said that, let's take a look at Mr. Sinister's ultimate. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, it's going to add an extra ability level to the clone's basic, special, and ultimate. And that alone is absolutely huge, because a lot of the clone targets have really, really, really big abilities that get drastically better when you put T4s in it. So essentially, for investing 1 ability's worth of T4s, your clone gains 3 abilities worth of T4s. That's a terrific trade, and again, there's so many characters where this makes a very, very dramatic difference. So for me, this is an absolute no-brainer, easy 4-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Mr. Sinister's passive. So this ability is really, really good for several reasons. For one, it gives a bunch of really, really good raw percentage stats to the entire Marauder team. He's going to give an extra 20% focus to everyone, which is certainly very useful for Mystique with the buff flips, Sabretooth for applying the bleeds, STRYFE for applying ability blocks, etc. In addition, he's going to give everyone, including himself, an extra 10% max health, which is really nice. And then on war defense, he's going to give everyone another 10% max health. So just right off the bat, you're getting an extra 20% max health and an extra 20% focus to the entire team just for the 1 ability. So even if it did nothing else, that's already a really good value and would probably get by as a 4-star. However, the other major thing is that the level of Mr. Sinister's passive is directly tied to the ability level of the clone's passive. And because passive abilities tend to be so impactful, again, it's very, very critical. Just putting T4s in this is the difference between a clone Phoenix, for example, having a level 5 passive instead of level 4. There's so many characters where that makes all the difference. So for me, this is, again, an absolute no-brainer, easy, easy 4-star. All right, so now we'll talk about Kingpin. And I'd mentioned it briefly in the beginning of the video, but ultimately why I really like Kingpin on this team is because of all the assists he generates. Firstly, when he uses his ultimate, he's going to generate an assist from Mystique and Sabretooth, and he has a chance to call for a 3rd assist. When he uses his special, he's going to generate an assist from Mystique and Sabretooth. And again, because he's a villain taking a turn, he has a chance to generate another assist. And same with his basic, he has a chance to call an assist, and his passive says that any villain can call an assist on their turn, so it's not uncommon to be getting 2 to 3 assists on almost every ability on almost every turn. It's just so much free passive damage that it makes this team start to resemble like a villain brawler team with just all the assists. It's really, really crazy. In addition, he's going to give 2 turns of defense up, which really, really helps STRYFE's ability to tank. He's also going to give a round of offense ups, which is going to be used very effectively because he's going to do it right before Sabretooth's big turn 2. Mystique will use her 2nd ability, and she'll use that extra focus for all the buff flipping is really, really good. Yeah, there's just so many reasons why it's really, really strong. If I'm not mistaken, I think STRYFE is able to ult on turn 2 as well, so the offense up for that is tremendous. But yeah, it's just really, really, really strong. His synergy on this team is incredible, and I definitely think that he's the best fit. Having said that, let's take a look at his abilities. Alright, so taking a look at Kingpin's basic, when you put tier 4s in this ability, it's going to add 60% damage to the primary target. I mean, technically 60% is slightly above average, but then Kingpin's damage is absolutely below average. In addition, he's a very slow character, and his first 2 abilities are not going to be as basic. So for how infrequently you're going to use this and for how little extra damage it does, even though the percentage is slightly above average, for me this is still a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Kingpin's special. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, it's going to give him a 50% chance to call a 3rd mercenary bodyguard when he summons his minions, and it's going to improve their stats and abilities a little bit. Now that said, these minions are really, really good for one thing, and that is dying immediately. Their stats almost never matter. They pretty much never have an amount of health that's relevant. They pretty much always die in one shot. Even if they do get another turn, their basic attacks might as well be mosquito bites. However, the fact that these minions spawn with a taunt is very useful, because getting an extra minion on the field with that taunt can easily absorb a huge single target ability from an enemy. So just the fact that that 1 extra summon can eat a huge attack that would have leveled someone else on the team alone makes this a well above average upgrade. So in spite of everything, I think this is a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Kingpin's ultimate. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, instead of having a 20% chance to call for an assist, he gets a 30% chance to call for an assist. This is abysmal. It might be one of the worst T4 upgrades in the entire game. He's a really slow character, so it's very, very uncommon that he uses this ability more than once in a match. And so going from 20% to 30% to call that assist means that almost every time you're still not going to get the assist. It's just a total non-factor ability. Definitely do not upgrade this. This might be the first 0 star, but I'll give it a 1 star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Kingpin's passive. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, it goes from a 20% chance to call an assist on any villain's turn to a 25% chance. So while it's true that it's not that crazy, in reality, when you have a team of 5 villains, it goes from a 1 in 5 chance to get that assist to a 1 in 4 chance to get that assist, so it becomes a bit more common. And again, an assist can absolutely do somewhere between like 10 and 25,000 extra damage, so it can be useful. It's not that common and it's not particularly reliable, but because of how much this team benefits from all the assists they already have going on, I can give this a 2 star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Merc Riot Guard. Now, at the beginning of this video, I briefly touched on why I like Merc Riot Guard on this team, but again, just a short recap. I really like how frequently he uses a non-damaging ability, which again on this team is going to call for an assist from Mystique and Sabretooth, so you're going to get really good value out of that by getting an abnormal amount of damage. In addition, he's going to constantly be refreshing defense ups on this team, and defense ups, as I've already stated several times, really benefit this team because they have decent sustain as it is thanks to Mr. Sinister, and STRYFE with defense up is a really effective tank, not to mention that Merc Riot Guard will also be taunting every other turn, so he's going to make it a pain for people to take out other priority targets. And Mercenary Riot Guard is one of the most underrated tanks in the game. He's actually a very, very effective tank. He has good block stats and he takes a hit really well. So again, him just constantly jumping in and running interference is exactly what this team needs, and he'll be generating the double assists from the 2 high damage characters on the team each time he does it. So yeah, you just get a lot of value out of this guy, and he is currently who I'm using as the 5th in my ward defense team. So let's take a look at his abilities. Looking at Merc Riot Guard's basic, if you put T4s in this ability, it's going to add 40% damage to the primary target, and that's it. Now, he's going to do this literally every other turn, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't have a particularly impressive damage stat, quite the contrary. It's just a 40% upgrade. It's barely a 2 star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Merc Riot Guard's special. So when you put tier 4s in this ability, the only thing that changes is instead of giving himself defense up for 2 turns, he's going to give himself defense up for 3 turns. Now, this isn't a tremendous difference because he's going to keep reapplying it every other turn as it is, but what I like about it is on the off chance that somehow he does get ability blocked or something like that, it does give him that extra turn of defense up, so he's still covered. So it's pretty rare that this ends up ever making a difference. It's pretty much non-functional, but there is that rare instance where it can be of use. So for that reason, I think I can give it a 2 star. And finally, we'll take a look at Merc Riot Guard's passive. When you put tier 4s in this ability, it's going to improve his block chance by another 5%. And again, pretty much all of his upgrades are just textbook standard upgrades, kind of the precedent that they established on day 1 global launch of this game. So just an extra 5% block chance, again, very, very standard. Certainly not bad on this character, but certainly not a game changer. So again, barely a 2 star. Alright, so there you have it. Those are my picks for the top tier 4 orange ability upgrades for the Marauders. I do want to give a big shout out to Vet for doing a terrific job editing. He's been working crazy hours getting one of these out every single day for you guys, so make sure you show Vet some love in the comments. Also want to thank Manic for helping me out and doing the timestamps on these videos, so if you guys use the timestamps in the video description, make sure you thank Manic for all his hard work. And finally, I wanted to talk about the Power Core giveaway on this video. If you weren't aware, I've done a Power Core giveaway on every single video that's been part of the 12 days of YouTube. On my very first stream that I do following the 12th video that's part of the 12 days of YouTube, I'm going to roll all the winners. So if you want, you can still go back and enter on every single video that's been out so far, so you'll have a lot of chances to win. As for this video, to enter in for the $10 worth of Power Cores that's being given away in the comments, all you have to do is simply let me know which character you would most want to see be the 5th character for the Marauder team. That's it, and you'll be entered for a chance to win. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for checking out this video. I will see you guys tomorrow for the 12th and final video that's part of the 12 days of YouTube. And then of course, I'll have some more videos out for you guys shortly after, but I've got some infographics and some roster reviews and stuff to catch up on. So having said that, again, thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you guys real soon. Until then, peace!